Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming.
Well, howdy, folks. Welcome back to this episode of the Line of Sight podcast. And my guest today, he is an author. He is a tabletop enthusiast. He is a YouTuber. I mean, he's got his fingers in a whole lot of different pies. Ronald Long from Acceptably Epic. Thanks for joining me on the Line of Sight podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So this is great. We've been trying to get our schedules to sort out, but we finally got it. And away we go. So let's start this the way I start everything, because you've talked about a little bit about this on your channel, but everyone listening may not know. Tell me, how did you get into tabletop wargaming?
Oh, man, I would assume most people have never heard of my channel, so I appreciate you saying the name of it. I got into tabletop gaming in middle school because a buddy of mine brought in, it was either like 5th edition handbook, like the rules, or the High Elf army book that he had like just picked up. I was like, hey, this stuff looks pretty cool. And it's like, hey, can I see that? Like, can I look at that stuff? And from there we went. It was so much fun.
And it was just that was the gateway, and it was just the slippery slope from there.
Yeah, I think I always get my additions wrong when it comes to Warhammer Fantasy Battles. So I was the edition where it was Britonia and the Lizardmen.
That's the edition I got started with.
Let's go.
Okay. That is the first box set I ever bought, Bretonian and Lizardmen. And then when I actually started collecting an army, it was High Elves.
Yeah. So, there you go. Okay. 5th. That's my Googling right now.
Okay. Well, I mean, Google's never wrong. So we'll go with that.
Ever.
Okay. So now, well, we're going to be jumping all over the place here. So you like to write what would be considered like high fantasy, sword and sorcery, all that kind of good stuff. Were you into that before? Is that why the fantasy side of Warhammer attracted you, or was it the game put you on that track?
No, it was about that time that I also started reading, because I had just started reading, novels at that point. So like we're talking 6th, 7th grade, getting in there. And I remember my first novel was Where the Red Fern Grows. So thank you for that trauma experience of getting through that. But then I followed that up with Redwall. Are you familiar with that series?
Yeah. I've always toyed with the idea of doing a Ratman army for fantasy and theming it off Redwall.
Yes, love Redwall. So whenever I had a video a while ago where people were like, I just love, Games Workshop's rats because they look so vermin and stuff like that. I'm like, you don't know how cool it could be, man. Like Redwall. It's okay with like stoic nightly rodents. No, I started reading Redwall, and that was my gateway drug into the Crystal Shard and Dragons of Autumn Twilight and all of that kind of stuff. So started really getting into the fantasy genre through that way, and Warhammer was like just a part of that really kept it coming.
The Dragonlance trilogy, that was actually what kind of brought me into the fantasy genre as well. Mm-hmm. My brothers had each been reading it, and they weren't necessarily fighting over it, but one would read it and they was like, will you hurry up, because I'm done with the last book, I want to read the next one. And so I finally got a chance to read it, and I was hooked. Those were fantastic.
And then alongside of that was like the video game era too, where I was playing some Final Fantasy video games and just like dragged into the story of what those games were, and just really, really enjoyed that stuff. And I realize like I age myself when we talk about this, because I say retro Final Fantasy, and I was talking with somebody a while ago, and they were like, yeah, you mean like Final Fantasy X? I was like, how dare you? Hey, Final Fantasy X is
well, but then here's the funny thing. You and I will say, no, Final Fantasy 1, and there'll be the actually person who will go, well, that's actually 3, because number 1 was released in Japan, but never here. Yeah.
No,
so then
all that type of stuff. all that type of stuff, man.
So how much would you say then all of that influenced when you sat down and started writing fantasy?
Oh, all of it. Absolutely.
That
Just the
you
idea of
played these
going
games,
like,
you read these stories, and then you said, "I want to add that." You took pieces of it. I mean, where do you get, your ideas, your
yeah,
inspiration from?
yeah, no, it's absolutely all of those things into a melting pot. And I've talked about this and I've shared this. Like I love pulling from all of these different places, right? So pulling from like Warhammer fantasy battles and the futuristic with 40K as well, like the lore that goes into that. And then pulling from on the other end, like the video games that I played, whose stories I really enjoyed and like kind of really um, pulling from those type of narratives. Because you think of a video game, the idea is to keep you playing the game, so the story has to be good all the way through,
Mhm.
right? Should be Final Fantasy VI, RIP. And so, uh, but we try. For me, it's pulling all of those things together. And I'll say I had this strange, maybe not strange, a kid in the late 90s, early aughts being like, what do I want to do when I grow up? Well, obviously, I want to be a video game designer because I love playing video games. Um, and I found this program called RPG Maker. I mean, it was old and clunky and weird, but I loved it because I could create a video game. The programming was there. Basically, like you paint your little map and then you can program your characters to walk inside of it and interact and things like that. That was story building inside of a video game for me. And that was kind of my first bits of learning how to tell stories and how to tell them well that then translated into, oh, I actually really enjoy the writing part. I love writing and telling stories, so I want to do that.
Outstanding. So then, um, if that's what got you into tabletop gaming,
Mhm.
and you started like many, if you don't start tabletop gaming with historical, you usually start with Warhammer of some kind.
Right.
So then how did you stumble upon one page rules?
Um, so with most things that are hobbies, right? You kind of pick them up, you put them down, you play for a little while, you don't play for a while. I'm a dad. I've got, we're a blended family. In between all of us, we've got 6 kids or 5 kids. Sorry, there's a lot to count sometimes. There was that parenting phase where, I had really young kids. And so the best I could really do was like kind of paint late at night or early in the morning and set that aside for a while just to write books. That was going to be like my thing. This last year, I was, just kind of scrolling, I think through either Facebook or some other social media and saw an advertisement for this game called One Page Rules. And I thought, well, that's fascinating because I've loved the idea of Warhammer for a really long time, but I've always found that like actually trying to play it is a little exhausting just for me. And you can say that that means that I don't like, the old laws and things like that.
The deep
Uh
magic? Yeah.
yeah, the deep ancient magic. But this idea, I'd fooled with this a little bit if you're familiar with Kings of War from Mantic Games.
Very familiar.
Yeah, I tried my hand at that a little bit with their regiment game. That was fine. That was okay. Age of Sigmar came out and it was simplified. It was like, oh, well, this is cool. Like, remember that first edition that they had where it
Yes.
was just a couple
It
pages
was
of rules?
very simple.
Yeah, one page rules then reminded me of that. And honestly, I had a lot of fun with that. And so this last Christmas, Dad bought himself a 3D printer for Christmas and I started kind of trying to figure this stuff out because I had enough models, from collecting for a long time and playing for a long time that I could put some pieces on the board and play with them. And then realizing that, oh, wait a second, like a box of 5 guys from Games Workshop is $60. One Page Rules is a Patreon where for like $10 a month, I can get files of like 50, 60 people and then print as whenever I want. Like, this is awesome. Why would I not support a company that's doing this? and I have been printing a lot this year.
I'm kind of the same similar situation as you, where huge collection of 40K stuff, but
Mm.
the idea of model agnostic, it was like 50-50. It was very enticing, and it was kind of not frightening, but I was hesitant about it because on the one side, I love the thought of bring whatever models you want,
Right.
but then there was always the fear of, okay, something like that can be abused, so it's going to be abused. So do I want to stick my, put my foot in that particular pond? But like you, when I saw just how much stuff was available, and now I think that's the direction that tabletop gaming is going. Everything is going to be 3D printed now. Companies are going
Mhm.
to more or less sell licenses or something like that. I don't know, I could be totally wrong, but now when I go, I don't know about you, it's almost terrifying to go on my mini factory to look for
Yeah.
something and see millions of options of it. And I just stare there. I'm like, I just wanted a dwarf berserker. Like, that's all, just
One.
one. And there's so many of them. I have no idea because they all look great. So
Yeah.
it's almost like the what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like the abundance of choice. It's almost too
Mhm.
much now.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
both good and both bad. So then let me put these last two questions then kind of together for you. So you're big into fantasy and writing and lore and all that, and you found one page rules. So what are your thoughts on one page rules lore? Have you delved into that much? What's going
I
on there?
Yeah, I have. I haven't even said this on my channel yet. So here's your exclusive news. So I actually reached out to One Page Rules about 6 months ago and said, "Hey guys, I am an author and really like writing stuff. Uh, I also really like tabletop games, and your stuff is real cool. Can we maybe do some things?" And so we have started to do some things. I've actually started writing for One Page Rules.
Oh, nice. And this is
Yeah.
this is beyond just like the what's it called? Like the writer's challenge where you have to write a whole story in
Yep.
one page in 48 hours and stuff. So this is
Yeah.
beyond that. Very nice.
Yeah. No. And so I think I have written now 4 short stories for them, and am working on another project that I'm actually really, really pumped about. That should be coming around in 2025, I think. And so, yeah, no, the putting them together, OPR's rules and lore have been really interesting. Getting to see a little bit into the uh to see how the sauce is made, right? And
Right.
kind of get and see that stuff. It's been fascinating to go from Warhammer grim dark, like everybody's a bad guy, kind of like you could really like everybody's wrong, to
Yeah.
swing the other way with OPR with what they're doing, to say like, hey, there's not like we're not puppy kickers here. Like that guy's like there people aren't just like inherently evil, or that race isn't inherently evil just to be evil. There's actually, there's some nuance to it, and it's a little refreshing, I have to admit.
Fascinating. So can you tell, is it in the fantasy genre, the sci-fi, or can you tell me without having to kill me?
Yeah, I don't. First off, I don't know your address, so
Oh, cool.
trying to off you at this point would be really tough. Um,
That's comforting.
I don't. I'm not sure. I haven't signed any NDAs, so I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to be cautious on what they've been willing to let me play around with. I mean, most of the stuff that I've been writing so far has been challenging to me because it has been in the sci-fi like stuff that they've been doing. Um, which is not my norm. So that's been like a challenge for my creativity to kind of work on, because all of my stuff that I've been writing personally has all been fantasy. And so
Right.
writing in the sci-fi space type genre, that's been really fun and really different and challenging. I don't know if that would ever like be something that I want to do for my personal page, or my personal stuff that I'm writing right now. In fact, I on the other side, for the podcast listeners who can't see what I'm pointing at, I'm pointing to this closet for Chris right behind me. My writing goals for the year are, I just wrote them all up. of what I plan to write and publish and release and whatnot. And it's still all fantasy, so we'll see how that pans out.
And when Ronald says he's been writing, here's a chance for you to plug your books a little bit. How many have you written? Because
Did you
I've
know
seen your videos. I've gone to your website. I'm like, come on now. Here's your chance to plug your own writing here.
I'm the worst salesman. So okay. Yeah, I have been writing now for it's 2024, 11 years. Um, and I'm looking at my vanity shelf over this way. And if I were to just do a real quick count, I'm at 34 books
Books.
in the last 11 years. Yeah.
Man, I don't think I've read 34 books in the last 11 years, let alone write them.
You
And,
know, I had a quote that keeps coming to mind to me, is incredibly helpful. Of people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10. And that's been something that I've really, really kept to heart and really have put to mind. And Dragonlance kind of helped me kind of jumpstart this thing with their bent to write in trilogies. And like you have the first original trilogy, and then the Heroes trilogy, and then the War of the Twins trilogy, and things like that. So when I first started writing in this fantasy world of Gilead that I've created and made up, I was like, all right, I'm going to have 5 continents, and each continent is going to get a trilogy, so I can really just explore this whole world. So the first time I planned to write a book, I really planned to write 15. Like that's how I started. And I'll say I have that problem with most creative projects I like to do. I way overshoot what most people are like, shouldn't you just like write a book? I'm like, nah,
write
man,
a
don't have
book
to write
rather
eight.
than start with 15. Then again, I think the listening audience is very aware of the idea of, purchasing 6 or 7 boxes of minis and thinking, yeah, I'll get these built and painted eventually. And then,
Eventually.
that's where the pile of shame gets started. So yours is simply establishing like a long-term writing goal,
Yeah.
what everyone else does maybe with model building and such. So that's interesting then you're because you're now for OPR, you're going to be doing some sci-fi. It's kind of
Yeah.
out of your wheelhouse, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, and I'm excited for the creative challenge. We talked about editing. This is gonna be great.
So then, um, I notice on your channel, yours is like mine. You kind of have lots of everything. You have commentary videos, you have battle reports, you have all kinds of stuff. Have you ever thought of bringing in your fantasy world that you've created and doing like fantasy narrative bat reps and making your characters actual? Here's the mini that represents that person
Yeah.
and going for it.
Yeah, that type of stuff sounds great. I I love it, and I will gladly add that to my list of creative things I'd love to accomplish in 2025. That'd be great. Um, no, I've gone on My Hero Forge and made, my own characters and been like, this is Eowyn, my main character from book one, and this is Kine, my main character from my second 15 book series that I'm currently writing. I have a problem, Chris. Um, and so no, I've definitely done that. And I haven't just not yet pulled the trigger on printing the mini, painting the mini, and then putting it in because that sounds really fun.
Well, it's always like the idea. Like when I stare at someone who has an army or something, I'm watching a YouTube video, or I have an idea, like we mentioned earlier, making a Ratman army themed on Redwall. That's a great idea, but my mind doesn't back up and say, okay, well, that's printing around 120 little rats and painting them and,
Right.
and so on. And so the idea is great. It's just the getting there that sometimes that's
Implementation
yeah.
can be a little tough.
So I was actually a bit surprised because I was looking at your channel just to get an idea of what was on there. And I was shocked when with the battle reports, they're all grimdark future. And I thought, for a man who writes and is so big into fantasy, all the bat reps are sci-fi.
Right? I don't know how well, okay, actually, I kinda do know how it ended up being like that. When I got into OPR exactly a year ago, the fantasy that they were printing at that moment or producing, was the vampiric undead. And that's cool. I like them, but I've always been more of the human army, right? The humanity type stuff. And I've always really enjoyed, like when I played Warhammer, I was Empire. That's what I wanted to play. High elves looked cool, dwarves looked cool, everything else looked cool, but I wanted to play the everyman. That's what I've always kind of gravitated towards. And so what's been really funny is that, yeah, I somehow decided that these videos that I was going to make on my channel were all going to be sci-fi stuff. And I think I've said a couple times, even in my bat reps, like, I'm going to do a fantasy one. Like, eventually, it's not like I don't have fantasy armies painted up. I have them. They're in my garage downstairs, painted up. They're ready to go. Just haven't done that yet. I'm excited tomorrow. I'm not sure when we release this, Chris, so this will be dated. Hey, go check out my channel. I probably have released a video of everything I printed in the year 2024, and have just laid out on my kitchen table. Be like, hey, look, these are all the armies that I've printed, and it's heavily sci-fi, which is funny because I'm a fantasy author right now.
I guess it's subconscious. Like
Yeah.
your subconscious is going, look, you're scratching the fantasy itch.
Hmm.
Now you need to balance that out with some sci-fi.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
who knows? Who knows? I just thought I'd ask because I found that very, very curious. It's like someone
Well,
who says they're a huge Yankees fan and that you go to their house and they have all Red Sox stuff on the walls.
right.
But
Well, okay, so you would then need to know that me and my daughters just recently played a four-person fantasy, you know, four-way OPR Age of Fantasy battle, and it was great. Like we had a ton of fun. About 4 hours playing on a Saturday because it's Christmas break right now, so that was
yeah.
like super fun. But yeah, they're all minors, so I'm not recording them. I can't put them on YouTube.
Right. Yes. Even I've done 2 bat reps where I had my daughter play, my older daughter, and even though she's in her mid-teens, she's still under 18.
Mhm.
So I made sure like you never saw her. She talked
Yeah,
and stuff, but
yeah,
it's always just very careful. I've wanted to do something with my younger daughter because she's about 9 and she's actually at the age now where she can build a kit by herself
yeah,
and she can
yeah.
paint stuff by herself. But I'm always hesitant to turn on the camera when that's going on. So that actually leads me to the question you kind of already answered there is does your family play? Does your wife
Yeah.
play? How many of your kids play? Is it a humor dad because he keeps pestering us or is there a genuine interest there?
You know, my oldest will say she remembers when she was young rolling dice with dad. Like that was kind of a thing that, hey, you're just like a toddler who I now am fairly certain is not going to swallow these. Hey, yeah, here,
Mhm.
roll these dice. This is kind of silly. Um, and so we got like a couple people out and just kind of goofed around and played with them. No, they've been enjoying playing with them here recently. And so like when I got Dominion, I did buy the Dominion box set from Games Workshop, which was Stormcast Eternal and the Oruks or whatever they call
Yeah,
them nowadays.
the new ones. Yep.
Yeah, that got split between my oldest and my youngest. They got those. So the oldest got Stormcast, my youngest got the Orcs, and then my middle daughter took the ghosts from the previous box that I had bought. I forget what that one was called, but that
Soul
was the
Wars.
yeah, Total War.
Soul Wars, I think.
Soul Wars, yes. So she got all the ghostly undead. She loves that. She thinks they're hilarious. Like, and so those are their armies. So right, we play orcs, ghostly undead, um, Stormcast, and then I play my Empire people or whatever I've printed up here recently.
And most of the stuff you print, is it the OPR prints, or where do you like to find your STL files?
The only places that I've really gone outside of OPR have been Beholder Miniatures. I've gotten some of their chaos stuff because again always having played empire which are technically the good guys, there's a part of me that's like write up some bad guys. I want to see what that paint some bad guys, see what that challenge to myself might be like. And then it's not Gamek who I've gotten some more sci-fi funny enough stuff from another uh that Scavenger, Station Forge, Station Forge.
Station Forge, yes, I'm familiar with Station Forge. They have good looking stuff.
Yeah, but
Um,
most most of it has been OPR. Most of it's
I
been
mean,
OPR.
as you said, if you're on the Patreon, use it. I mean, you're paying for it, and the more you print, the more value you're getting for your $10 a
Oh,
month.
yeah.
So
And the wood elves that they're doing right now are phenomenal. I've got a lot of them printed up, and I'm very excited to get painting on them.
now, have you ever thought of doing the Patreon painting competition, submitting something for that?
Oh, I'd love to. I just haven't.
It's just that we'll put that on the list as well, right after the
Yeah.
narrative campaign based on your novels.
Probably
Okay,
on the
good.
list. And I am that painter who, as long as you are an arm widths away from my miniature, it looks great. It's gonna be fine. But like YouTube quality, put real close camera up to it, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, Ronald, I see that craft paint. I get it. You need to work on your skills a little bit. But that's been the fun part about painting is for a while, and you might understand this too. I would buy the expensive Warhammer kit and like just be almost frozen with trying to paint it up because I'm like, this thing cost a lot of money. I don't want to
Yeah,
mess
if
it up
I mess it up, that's to strip it or to try and redo it. Yeah, yeah.
over again. Yeah, no, the freedom of being able to print stuff and paint has been so wonderful. I've painted way more this last year than I have in the previous 5 combined, just because I felt the freedom to do it, knowing that, well, if I mess it up, this guy cost 10 cents, 15 cents. I can print them again. It'll be fine.
And how about your daughters? Are they into the painting side, or do they just like the
They're
playing
getting there.
side? They're
Yeah,
getting
no,
there?
they've been starting to paint. I've had a couple, sit down and everybody paints and stuff like that. My youngest helped me base coat some guys this last weekend with the airbrush. So that was her first time like spraying on the airbrush too, so that was fun. So they'll definitely sit down and they'll do some painting with that. And my wife has started to play as well,
Oh, you're gonna
because
have to tell everyone here how you manage that.
well, it helps when you marry a nerdy girl. I mean, let's
Ah,
be
okay.
real. But also you have to know. I'll give this tip. I took I took her to the Warhammer store here in town in San Antonio and was like, "Hey, this is silly. I need you to know how big of a nerd I am." Like she knew I wrote books and stuff like that. I was like, "I need you to understand the depth of nerddom that I really adhere to." So we went to the Warhammer store and we were the guy who runs it, he's having his lunch break, so he's inside. A couple dudes hanging outside for a little bit. And we're just chatting with him, and this guy asks, like, what you doing here? I'm like, well, I play Warhammer. She's trying to learn into it. And he goes into this deep dive immediately of the lore of Warhammer, of the why Sigmar had to recreate all this stuff. And Amy, my wife, is looking at me like, is this what you're into? Is this what this is about to be? I
Starting
was
to
like,
question her decisions.
I was like, "No, no, no, no. Okay, I need to remind you, babe. There are armies with horses in them." She's like, "Oh yeah, that's what I'm here for." I'm like, "Boom. Okay, great. We're in. All right. Good, 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 good."
Actually, really interesting that you mentioned that because I think February. I think this podcast is going to be the March episode, but February, I actually interviewed the rare, the elusive girl gamer.
Hey,
And I was asking her, why don't you think more girls are in it? How do you get your girlfriend, your wife's significant other? And she said exactly what you said, is the guy is so excited to bring his significant other in that he overwhelms her with everything. And she's like, I can't. This is just too much.
yeah. Start. So here's my tip. Start small. Show significant other, whoever they may be, the army you think they would like, and go. Doesn't that look cool? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to like maybe like go hold one of those guys? Yeah, let's go hold one of those guys, and then like start there. Right? Paint them that way, get them a little set, slow walk them. If they are into it and they want to read the books, they'll get there. But don't start with why the Emperor of Mankind might not be dead. Let's not. Don't. It's you're not going to
Right.
win.
Yeah. Well, we'll start with the basics, like what a D6 is and so on. And then we'll move on to the deep philosophical stuff. And
Hmm.
I think that's one place where One Page Rules has a big advantage over Games Workshop. Even though Games Workshop has the momentum, they have the
Yeah.
presence. they if you're wanting to get into the hobby and you go into that store and like you said, you give her a box and she's like, "Hey, this is cool." And then she turns it over and looks at the price. And
Oh
she's like,
yeah.
"But it's not that cool."
Nope.
Whereas you could sit her down on the computer and say, "Look through all the STL files for this. You tell me the one you want and I'll print you it up." And how
Hmm.
much will that cost? A quarter, 50 cents, what
Yeah.
have you.
Yeah.
So much smaller learning curve to get into it.
Yeah. No, I told my wife, "Hey, there's an army with horses." And she said, "No, that's fantastic. Print me all the horses." And I was like, "All right, great." So I made her an army of human
Just
empire that was just all the horse ones. She's like, "This is great. Yeah, I want to play now. Let's do this." And I was like, "Okay, cool."
nice. So there you are, folks. If you're listening, there's start simple and small. And now you've heard it from two different people. Start simple, start small, find the point of interest, and just kind of build on top of that.
Yeah.
I tried the same thing. I asked my wife, and I said, if I were to start, if I were to introduce you to this, what army might you want to play? And this was funny. This was when I was still exclusively Warhammer 40K. She said, "What army doesn't have a lot of skulls?" And I went, "Never mind.
Oh
Just,
no.
just never mind." And
They
she
they
said, "Which one is the least?" I don't remember how she said it, but she wanted the one with the least nightmarish things. And I thought, well, that narrows it down to basically Guard or Eldar.
yeah.
And then I told her, she's like, "So there's a human faction?" Yes. Okay, that one.
Perfect.
So that was as close as we got. But
Perfect.
okay. So you first got into gaming through GW stuff. You then
Yeah.
discovered OPR. What other games? You mentioned Kings of War and Mantic. What's your other repertoire? What games do you like playing?
I'm very simple when it comes to my wargaming stuff, and I tend to just get like say, okay, this is good. I know this. I will play this. So when it comes to like tabletop wargaming and stuff like that, I've never gotten into bolt action. I've never gotten into the historical side, like you said, mostly just because I have a lot of things that I've printed this last year with what I art with just one, I guess two Warhammer and OPR sets of games. So that for me, that's what I keep. Now, the trick is I have some friends who are huge board game players and they own, and I don't think I'm exaggerating here, all the board games. I mean, like all the board games. And so, they've come over and we're in the middle of a Star Wars Imperial Assault campaign, and that's been really fun to get to play. But that's not me doing it. That's my buddies saying, "Hey, Ronald, this is a really fun game," and I'm going, "Okay, I like hanging out with you. Let's play a really fun game." So that's been my expertise. Whatever I get introduced to from my board game buddies who know what they're talking about.
That's what's right. And do you still play some GW games, or have you kind of gravitated mostly to one page rules?
You know what's funny is the people who want to play Warhammer, like GW for sure, are my daughters. Because
Okay.
here's the one is what they got introduced to, right? So dad switched
Um,
over to the new cool gaming system, and they're like, "Dad, do you ever want to play like Warhammer again?" I'm like, "No, let's play one rules. It's so much easier." Um, so yes, sometimes I will come back over to Warhammer and things like that and play with my daughters because they really want to. But even like my friends who have been really big Warhammer people, I've introduced them to OPR, and they've really enjoyed it because we can get a game done in an hour and a half instead of 6 hours.
yes.
Um, and that's been
Yeah.
really really fun. So the guys that I've been playing with at the friendly local gaming store. If you're in San Antonio, check out Hole in the Wall Hobbies. They're a lot of fun. Um, it's been guys who have been slowly saying, "Hey, have you heard of one page rules? I'll play a game with you. Do you want to try it out?" And then working them from there. It's been great.
Well, I was actually going to ask then, what is the OPR community like where you live? Is it just the few people you know? Are there like how big is that group that meets at that store?
I would say there's a handful of us. I think at this point, 5, 6 or so. But it's certainly beyond me because if you're a Patreon, or even if you're not a Patreon, actually, I think you can join the One Page Rules Discord. can find, people in your area to play a game with. And if you live in a decently sized area that at least has a game store around it, you can probably find somebody who'd be willing to play one page rules. But at this one particular store, I know we've been able to get, five or six guys who've been able to play, plus some of my friends who I've been pulling in from other places as well. Other my board game buddies who I'm slowly converting to tabletop game people. They just don't know it yet. We're working
Well,
on
I
this.
mean, it's kind of like if you like playing board games, you usually like to start playing with the board games that have fancier schmancier tokens and things to move. And if you play Dungeons and Dragons, you're halfway there.
You're
It's
so
just a
close.
matter, yeah. It's just multiply the number of pieces on the board by 10 or 50, and you're basically playing tabletop board game. It's that
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah, and the guys who I have been playing OPR with here recently have come from Dungeons and Dragons, right? They've been kind of coming from that direction, so that's been really fun too.
Now, have you introduced them to Quest?
I haven't. I A no, B I want to, um, because the narrative campaigns that they're doing with Quest look super fun, right? Just like reading through Shadow Stalkers this last time and like Heart of the Rot right now, the ones that they're doing. Like really well done stuff. Really cool looking. And I think scratches the itch of the game I wanted to make when I was a kid playing with Warhammer, thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I could just like, I love the big battle, but like these little battles too, wouldn't it be neat if like my guy could be like the video game hero? So no, I haven't yet, but it's fascinating. I've looked through the rules. It's really, really cool stuff. Have you managed to play a lot of Quest?
Not a lot. I played, let's see, I probably played 2 or 3 games of Quest. Managed to put one up as a battle report, and then I
Mm,
played 1 game of Star Quest,
yeah.
and with a friend, and that one's up too. That's the Helldivers one. Like everyone
Yeah.
who plays Helldivers knows. And I thought this would be perfect. A small group that has to take on just hordes and hordes and hordes of enemies. And so a friend of mine, he printed up a whole bunch of the robots,
Yep.
the automatons, and we had a blast with it. So yeah, I think that would be fantastic. A great way for you to take your novels, take your characters,
Hmm.
and you can actually play through without having to necessarily have, because I mean, like most novels, you're following a small group of characters or maybe one
Right.
or so. That doesn't necessarily lend itself to a massive a battle or war game, but a small group working through a quest like that, awesome.
That
So
could be really.
folks, he just added that to his list too, I imagine. It's an
Uh,
ever-growing list.
yeah, Chris, we need to talk less because I think we've added three things so far, and I
All right.
mean we're filling up 2025. My creative schedule is getting fuller and fuller. I do like it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same thing. Anytime I see anybody play an army, I think to myself, and now I want one of those.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so, it's just it comes with the hobby. Everybody who's in this hobby knows exactly what's that like. Your eyes are always bigger than your painting skills and so on and so forth there. So then, um, tell me a bit about your channel. Why did you decide to start a YouTube channel? Where do you see it going?
Yeah.
Run with that.
Part of the reason I wanted to have a YouTube channel, the original, I think, goal of mine was to talk about author things, right? To just talk about book stuff. And if you look back, way back, that was a lot of my original content of like, hey, trying to talk about author things, and which I still enjoy. And I tell people, I will mention a lot of times that I'm an author, and this is where you can find my books and things like that. But then once OPR came around, that was probably about the same time that I started listening to the Poor Hammer podcast, which I think those guys are hilarious. I think that's really fun. Um, and there was just a part of me that was like, you know what? I think I could talk about OPR, and especially if they're releasing monthly content, it's stuff to talk about, it's stuff to print and to do. There was just that creative mind of going like, well, hold on, I could print stuff from OPR, and then I could paint the stuff, and I could play this battle report because I also enjoy watching battle reports online, and so I was thinking I could create the thing that I like to watch and to take in myself. And so that was why I started really kind of going heavy into OPR with this stuff. Now, the last 6 months, I have not been as let's say religious in my release schedule as I'd like to be. But life is happening, and that's totally fine. But the impetus was OPR is really fun. I kind of want to document my journey with this stuff and learn this stuff and have some, on the other end, accountability for printing and painting and playing. If I'm putting it online, I'm having to be a little accountable. And so that's going to push me a bit.
So has by starting to put your painting projects, your bat reps, stuff like that, how has that changed the way the hobby is for you? Like for I don't mean this to be leading, but once I started filming bat reps, they became very different playing the game.
Yeah.
And when I started filming painting, suddenly it was very different than just sitting down to paint a few models. Has that changed anything for you?
Well, I'll throw the question back at you. Do you enjoy it more, less, or differently?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
So now to answer that, it's I used to say I'm going to record everything I paint because then I'll have tons and tons of that, and I suddenly realized it started feeling like work.
yep,
And so now it's okay, I'm going to record this painting tutorial, but all
yeah,
these other ones, I'm just going to do that for me.
yeah,
And occasionally I'll specifically go to the friendly local gaming store and play a game and not record it, just
yeah,
to play the game.
yeah.
Because it's so much different when you're worrying about the camera angle and editing and is the lighting good and you drop the F bomb, now I have to edit that out and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, did I have
So
the microphone off for the last 10 minutes? Oh, man, and so
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, I just lost 15 minutes of footage. Wonderful.
yeah,
So it is interesting to make sure that I keep the hobby a hobby and to keep the channel a hobby as well.
yeah.
So good on you for turning the question back on me. I was just curious how you found that experience.
No, I think I would agree. There's definitely been points when I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna get the camera out," and kind of stop myself. I'm like, "No, this one's for me. I'm just gonna enjoy painting this army, and I'm just gonna enjoy doing this." Now, that said, I do want to attempt to, you know, record some more and make sure that I'm being a little bit more consistent with what I'm releasing and when, but trying to find that important balance between work and hobby, right? How much of this is just fun and I enjoy this and I want to keep enjoying this, and how much of this is, hey, I want to put out some content for people to enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. In fact, one of the things that I'm very lucky with, anybody who watches the channel knows Josh. He's a regular fixture. And it
Mhm.
just so happens that because he and I, our schedules align to the point where we can play a game every week, most of the time,
Yeah,
that's how I'm able to post a battle report every week. And suddenly I realize how much more difficult it would be just trying to find the time to play a game, record it, with that kind of a schedule going. I never realized it when I would watch these other channels, some of my favorite channels for 40K and such, where they say, "Oh yeah, we post a bat rep every week." I'm like, "Oh, that shouldn't be too hard."
right.
It's harder than you'd think.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to make sure that you have it all scheduled and done and put together, or unless you take the lonely option, which I've done on several of mine, and just play a battle with myself. It's super fun.
But you're not alone in that. In fact, who is it when I talk to War Boss Fitz, when I
Yeah.
talk to ULC Bat Reports, when I talk to I think Daniel, he hasn't done a solo yet. Oh, Square Table Union. Like a
Mhm.
lot of these other channels that do OPR stuff, they do it solo
Yeah.
because, just like I said, it's less of a hassle. They don't have to worry about, oh, I had a game scheduled, it canceled. Now,
Right.
how the heck am I going to come up with a bat rep for this week? So I totally get that.
Yeah. No, it's great to have a buddy who you can rely on and depend on. Um, I would I'm interested in, taking my guys who, I'm currently usually we're pretty good for about once a week to play our board games. Like we have like Tuesday night board game night. And that's been really, really fun to kind of get down. Uh, and play with them, mostly because, hey, it's the internet culture, right? Like you can be around people all day without actually being around people all day. And so it's been really great to have these guys over at my house weekly basis. We're just hanging out, we're goofing off, playing games. Um, that is something that from all of this hobbying that I have really found to be just so refreshing and fun, an excuse to hang out with the dudes. And a family who's supportive of this, which is really, really great.
Yes.
And then trying to then take some of that and turn it into like, hey, let's play this cool game that I came on. Would be fun to do, but I guess I want to be cautious and not take too much advantage of my friends and make sure that I can just hang out for hanging out's sake.
Right. You don't want to make that same mistake with introducing the significant other where you suddenly bombard them with all this and it acts as a turnoff rather
Right.
than a slow introduction to it. So outstanding. I don't know. You think I'm sure if you heard about the Ranger program that OPR just announced
I did, and I think I had to make the conscious decision like that sounds cool.
for somebody else.
Other people, yeah. um, it's a for I so we talked about it this a little bit. I got married in June. Really really fun. But because of that, I put a lot of my creative projects on hold because, hey, I want to make sure that I'm showing my wife how much I love her and that she's really great.
Well, and you
And
said there were 5 kids in the household?
yep, 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 yep.
That's yeah, that's a lot.
It is quite a lot, and it's a blast. And so, kind of intentionally taking a step back from that stuff just so that we can have some good footing, some good foundation from which to launch this next year. And I think everything now kind of feels like, all right, if I were to start doing these things again, it wouldn't encroach on that foundation of the family and what we've got, put together in. And so I'm excited for 2025 because I feel like I'll be able to write more, which I'm really looking forward to, and potentially record more too. So we'll see.
Well, then let's we're getting close to our time here. So one other question, because a lot of the demographic that watches my channel and listens to the podcast here, according to YouTube, it's like 99.9% guys between the ages of 25 and 45,
Hey,
roughly.
fellas.
Yeah, it's exactly it's dudes like us. But I imagine a lot of them are in a similar situation. You have kids, I have kids. We want to pursue this hobby, but we have other responsibilities. So how do you try and find that balance where you don't have to put your hobby so far in the back burner that, it's this distant memory, but like you said, you also want to give your family their due. So how do you balance that?
Yeah. Some of that is when my kids were younger, it was really easy to either choose to wake up early or stay up late. Okay, you put the kids in bed, you can hobby for a little bit without, feeling guilty about it. Or what I would do a lot, especially with my writing, is I just wake up before everybody and get a good hour of writing in and then, off to the day job, right? Because I had hit my goal that I was trying to do. Now that my kids are older and high school is happening and they're staying up like super late just trying to get homework done, the stay up late option of and not being around them is less of a guilt-free option. So now it's more like we were talking about before, it's trying to bring them in and try to say, "Hey, this isn't just a me thing. I would love for you to come along with me and to play with me." And for, my family, some of that has been like DMing some Dungeons and Dragons stuff, which they've really latched onto and they have a lot of fun with that. And some of that is, hey, let's sit down and let's paint together, right? We're just going to have fun and we're just going to paint together for a while. And some of it is they, on Christmas break, I told them, like, hey, I will do whatever y'all want to do for Christmas break. Could we get in a big game, like just one big game over Christmas break? I'd really like to do that. And they were like, "Oh yeah, Dad, we can do that." And so we were able to. And so I think as much as you can bring them in of what they kind of at the level they want to, whether it's the painting or the playing or the narrative or the lore, kind of bringing them into your hobby is a fun thing, or just being okay with some what is it called, like side by side play where like, hey, You want
Yeah.
to read your book. That's great. I want to paint here right next to you. Is it cool if I paint here next to you and you read your book and I'll paint? We'll chit chat a little bit while that's happening. Some stuff like that I think is also just really valuable to be like, I just want to be in your same space. Just want to be in the same space together. You're not in your room. I'm not in my room. We're all together and we're just hanging out, being goofy and having a good time.
Outstanding. So there you have it, folks. All kinds of advice on how to balance hobby, family, home life, all that good stuff. So before we sign off here, any last tidbits of wisdom or parting cliches or,
Sure, sure,
anything?
sure. I will say, even if you are listening to this and you're thinking, man, it's been so long since I've played or written or whatever, there are seasons for everything. You will find seasons where you can be able to play more or to game more or write more or what have you. But just really enjoy the season that you're in right now. Because we're looking at kids at this point and knowing that there's a ticking timeline of when they're going to be off to college and grown and gone. And so right now, just really enjoying the fact that I get to be dad and enjoy time with them, and every once in a while bring them into my hobby. So that's really cool.
Outstanding. Well, thanks again to Ronald for joining me on the podcast here. For everybody listening, make sure you check out his channel, Acceptably Epic. I'll try and remember to put a link to it down in the video description. But if I don't, it's called Acceptably Epic, and it has lots of commentary, OPR content, authorship content, all kinds of good stuff like that. So give him a bit of a look. See, I'll also, if Ron is okay with it, I'll put a link to your either your Amazon page with your books or your author page or something like that. I mean, why not?
Fantastic. If
Free advertising.
you really want to, you could check out rglongauthor.com. That's where all the stuff is.
There you have it, folks. So until next time, we'll see you again on the Line of Sight podcast. Everyone keep your dice on the table, and we'll see you then.